Hello everyone. I invite you to continue listening to the horror story, which is thrilling and captivating. Don't forget to give me a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you everyone. The abandoned Blackmore prison where there is no escape. The wind howled across the desolate moors of Devon, carrying with it whispers of forgotten sins. Blackmore jail stood like a rotting tooth against the gray sky, its crumbling stone walls swallowed by ivy and time. Once a fearsome prison in the heart of England, it had housed the worst of humanity, murderers, traitors, and madmen, until it was abandoned in 1897, after a fire claimed the lives of over 100 souls. The locals said the screams still lingered in the air, trapped in the blackened corridors. They said the place was cursed. And yet there I was standing at its rusted gates, my breath fogging in the chill of an October dusk. My name is Evelyn Hart, a journalist with a penchant for the macabre. I'd spent years chasing ghost stories across the UK, from the haunted castles of Scotland to the spectral pubs of London. Blackmore Jail was my latest obsession. Rumors had surfaced online, grainy photos of shadowy figures in the windows, recordings of distant wails, and claims of a presence that drove visitors mad. The prison had been sealed off by the government decades ago, but I'd secured permission from a reluctant official to spend one night inside. Armed with my camera recorder and a stubborn curiosity, I pushed open the gate, its screech echoing across the empty landscape. The courtyard was a graveyard of broken stone and twisted iron. Cell blocks loomed ahead, their windows like hollow eyes staring down at me. The air felt heavy, as though it carried the weight of every soul that had suffered here. I stepped inside the main entrance, my boots crunching on shattered glass. The smell hit me first, damp rot and something metallic like old blood. My flashlight beam danced across peeling walls, illuminating graffiti scratched by long dead hands. He sees us, no escape. The hollow takes. I shivered, chalking it up to vandals, but the unease gnawed at me. I set up my base in the warden's office, a small room with a cracked desk and a single barred window. The plan was simple. Record audio overnight, take photos and document anything unusual. I'd heard the tales: prisoners driven to claw their own eyes out, guards vanishing without a trace, and a shadowy figure known only as the Hollow said to roam the halls. Skepticism was my shield, but as the sun dipped below the horizon, the prison seemed to awaken. Distant thuds echoed through the walls like footsteps pacing an unseen floor. I checked my recorder. It was running, capturing every sound. The first hour passed uneventfully. I explored the ground floor, my flashlight revealing rusted cell doors and chains dangling from the ceiling. In one cell, I found a faded photograph pinned to the wall, a stern-faced man in a guard's uniform, his eyes scratched out with something sharp. The air grew colder as I moved deeper, the temperature dropping despite the lack of wind. My breath quickened. I told myself it was the damp, the isolation playing tricks on my mind. But then I heard it, a low guttural moan rising from the stairwell to the upper floors. I froze, my flashlight trembling in my hand. The sound came again, louder, more distinct, like a voice stretched thin by agony. I should have turned back. Every instinct screamed at me to leave. But I was here for a story, and I'd be damned if I fled at the first sign of trouble. I climbed the stairs, the metal groaning under my weight. The second floor was a maze of narrow corridors, each lined with cells. The moan had stopped, replaced by an oppressive silence that pressed against my ears. In cell 2B, I found something that made my stomach lurch. Scratched into the stone wall was a message. "Evelyn, it waits below." My name, my actual name. I stumbled back, heart pounding. Couldn't be real. A coincidence, a prank, someone must have known I was coming. But the scratches looked fresh, the dust beneath them undisturbed. I snapped a photo, the flash briefly blinding me. When my vision cleared, the message was gone. The wall was blank. Panic clawed at me, but I forced myself to keep going. The recorder hung heavy around my neck, its red light blinking steadily. I descended to the basement where the worst prisoners had been kept, the solitary confinement cells. The air down here was thick, suffocating, and the walls glistened with moisture. My flashlight flickered, casting jagged shadows that seemed to twist and writhe. I reached the end of the corridor where a single door stood apart from the others. It was iron-rusted but intact, with a small barred window at eye level. A plaque above it read, "The Hollow Cell." The stories flooded back. The Hollow Cell was where they'd locked away Thomas Vane, a prisoner so violent he'd killed 3 guards with his bare hands. They said he'd screamed for days after the fire, even as the flames consumed him, his voice echoing long after his body should have been ash. I peered through the window. The cell was empty save for a single chair bolted to the floor. But something was wrong. The shadows inside didn't match my light. They moved independently, stretching toward the door. A whisper brushed my ear, soft, unintelligible, but close. I spun around, shining my flashlight down the corridor. Nothing. Just the dripping of water and my own ragged breathing. I turned back to the cell and my blood ran cold. A face stared back at me through the bars, pale, eyeless, its mouth stretched into a grotesque grin. I screamed, dropping the flashlight. It hit the ground with a clatter, plunging me into darkness. Fumbling blindly, I grabbed the light and switched it on. The face was gone. The cell was empty again. My hands shook as I backed away, my mind racing. Hallucination. It had to be. Exhaustion, fear, the power of suggestion. I'd heard too many stories. But then the recorder beeped, signaling it had stopped. I rewound it and pressed play. Static crackled, followed by my footsteps, my voice muttering notes. And then, clear as day, a voice that wasn't mine. "Evelyn, stay." I ran. Up the stairs, through the corridors, past the cells with their claw-marked walls. The prison seemed to shift around me, the layout twisting into something unfamiliar. Doors I hadn't noticed before appeared, some ajar, revealing glimpses of figures hunched in the shadows. The thuds grew louder, faster, as though something massive pursued me. I reached the warden's office and barricaded the door with the desk, my chest heaving. The recorder lay on the floor, still playing. The voice repeated over and over, "Evelyn, stay. Evelyn, stay." I turned it off, but the whispers continued seeping through the walls. My camera sat on the desk, its screen glowing faintly. I flipped through the photos, images of the courtyard, the cells, the scratched message. But the last photo wasn't mine. It showed me standing in the basement, staring at the hollow cell. Behind me was a figure, tall, emaciated, its face a void of shadow. I hadn't seen it. I hadn't felt it. But there it was, captured in perfect clarity. The desk shuddered as something slammed against the door. Once, twice. The wood splintered and a low growl filled the room. I grabbed my bag and climbed onto the desk, smashing the barred window with my flashlight. The glass shattered and I squeezed through the jagged edges, tearing at my jacket. I hit the ground outside, the cold air a shock after the suffocating prison. I didn't look back. I ran across the courtyard, through the gate, and into the moors, the wind swallowing the sounds of pursuit. When I reached my car miles away, dawn was breaking. My hands trembled as I fumbled with the keys, glancing at the rearview mirror. The prison was a dark smudge on the horizon, but I swore I saw movement, something pacing the walls. I drove back to London in silence, the recorder and camera locked in the trunk. I didn't dare listen or look again. Not yet. Back in my flat, I tried to write the story. But every time I typed, the words twisted into nonsense gibberish about hollows and eyes and staying. I uploaded the recorder's audio to my laptop, hoping to analyze it. The file was corrupted, filled with hours of static, and that same voice now screaming my name. The photos were worse. Every image showed the figure closer in each frame, until the final one, just its eyeless face pressed against the lens. I burned the evidence. The recorder, the camera, my notes, all of it went into a fire in my backyard. But it didn't help. The whispers followed me. In the shower, in my sleep, in the hum of the city. "Evelyn, stay." I stopped leaving the house. The shadows in my flat grew longer, darker, pooling in corners where they shouldn't. Last night I woke to find scratches on my walls, fresh, deep, spelling my name. I'm writing this now as a warning. Blackmore Jail isn't abandoned. It's waiting. The Hollow isn't a ghost, it's something older, something that feeds on the living. If you go there, it will see you, it will know you, and it will never let you go. A scarier story. The maw of Grimsdyke Prison. The fog clung to the cliffs of Cornwall like a shroud, its tendrils curling around the jagged remains of Grimsdyke Prison. Perched on the edge of a sheer drop, the prison's silhouette loomed black and skeletal, its towers piercing the sky like broken claws. Built in 1793, it had been a pit for the damned thieves, rapists, and killers locked away to rot until it closed in 1921 after an outbreak of plague left no survivors. The locals called it the maw, claiming it swallowed souls whole. They avoided the cliffs, said the ground trembled with the rage of the dead. I didn't believe them, not until I stepped inside. I'm Daniel Creed, a photographer drawn to the ruined and the forsaken. My work had taken me to crumbling asylums, rusted factories, and war-torn bunkers, but Grimsdyke was different. I'd found a journal in a London antique shop, its pages brittle and stained, detailing the prison's final days. The writer, a guard named Elias Crow, described prisoners clawing at their flesh, vomiting black bile, and screaming about a mouth in the walls. The last entry simply read, "It's awake." That was enough to hook me. I packed my camera, flashlight, and a knife just in case and drove to the coast. The road ended a mile from the prison, forcing me to hike through the fog-drenched heath. The air tasted of salt and decay, the sea crashing far below. When I reached the gates, they hung off their hinges, rusted and swaying in the wind. Beyond them, the courtyard stretched, cracked and overgrown with weeds that twisted like veins. The main building gaped open, its entrance a toothless maw framed by stone. I adjusted my camera, its lens fogging briefly, and stepped inside. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the drip of water echoing from somewhere deep. My flashlight carved a path through the gloom, revealing walls streaked with mold and what looked like claw marks. The stench was unbearable, wet earth and something rancid like meat left to spoil. I swallowed my unease and moved deeper, passing cells with doors torn free, their interiors smeared with dark stains. In one, a rusted shackle dangled from the ceiling, a skeletal hand still clasped within its grip. I snapped a photo, the flash illuminating the bones for a split second before the darkness swallowed them again. I set up in the guard tower, a narrow room overlooking the cell blocks. The journal mentioned it as Crow's Post, so it felt fitting. I spread my gear across a splintered table, camera, tripod, flashlight, and the knife within reach. The plan was to shoot the night, capture the prison's decay, and maybe catch something supernatural if the rumors held truth. As dusk fell, the fog thickened, pressing against the tower's cracked windows. Then the noises began, low at first, a scraping like nails on stone, then a rhythmic thudding rising from the lower levels. I grabbed my flashlight and descended the spiral stairs, each step creaking under my weight. The sound grew louder, more insistent, guiding me to the kitchen, a cavernous space lined with rusted ovens and hooks. The floor was slick with a black sludge that clung to my boots, its surface rippling as I crossed. In the center stood a trapdoor, its edges gnawed as though something had chewed its way out. The journal had mentioned a cellar, a punishment pit for the worst inmates. Against every shred of sense, I lifted the hatch, its hinges screaming, and shone my light below. A stone staircase spiraled into darkness, the air rushing up cold and sour. The thudding stopped, replaced by a wet gurgling like a throat struggling to breathe. I should have turned back, but the pull was magnetic, the need to see to know. I climbed down the steps, slick with slime, my flashlight flickering with every movement. At the bottom, the cellar opened into a circular chamber, its walls carved with crude symbol spirals and jagged lines that pulsed faintly in the light. In the center was a hole, a perfect circle 10 feet wide, its edges smooth and glistening like polished bone. I edged closer, the gurgling louder, now a sound that vibrated in my chest. My light barely penetrated the pit, revealing only a slick sheen on its walls and a faint shimmer far below. Then something moved, a ripple in the blackness, a shape rising slow and deliberate. I stumbled back, my camera slipping from my hands. It hit the ground, the shutter clicking on impact. The flash lit the chamber, and I saw it, a mass of flesh, pale and bloated, studded with eyes that wept past its surface, splitting to reveal a mouth lined with teeth like shards of glass. I ran, the flashlight bouncing wildly as I scrambled up the stairs. The gurgling turned to a roar, a wet bellow that shook the walls. I slammed the trapdoor shut, dragging an oven across it, my hands shaking so hard I dropped the knife. The floor buckled beneath me, the sludge bubbling up through the cracks. I bolted for the guard tower, my breath ragged, the camera left behind. The journal's words burned in my mind. It's awake. In the tower, I barricaded the door with the table, my flashlight trained on the entrance. The noises followed me, thuds and scrapes, and that awful gurgling echoing through the prison. My phone had no signal, the fog cutting me off from the world. I waited, heart hammering, as the hours crawled by. Then the windows rattled, a slow, deliberate tap, tap, tap against the glass. I swung the light toward them and froze. Faces pressed against the panes, eyeless and slack, their mouths gaping, their skin peeling away in strips. They weren't reflections, they were outside, clawing at the frame. The door shuddered, something heavy slamming against it. The table slid an inch, the wood groaning. I grabbed the flashlight, its beam my only weapon, and swung it at the window, smashing the glass. The faces vanished, but the tapping continued now, from the walls, the ceiling, the floor. The prison was alive, its stones shifting, grinding like teeth. I climbed onto the sill, the fog swallowing the drop below. The door splintered behind me, and I jumped, landing hard on the courtyard stones, my ankle twisting beneath me. I crawled toward the gates, the fog so thick I could barely see my hands. The ground trembled, the thudding closer, now a rhythm like a heartbeat. I reached the gates and pulled myself through, collapsing onto the heath. The prison loomed behind me, its silhouette warping the towers, bending inward like jaws closing. I stumbled to my car, miles away, the pain in my ankle a dull roar. Dawn broke as I drove off, the fog lifting to reveal a sky streaked with red. Back home I couldn't sleep. The journal sat on my desk, its pages untouched since that night. I'd lost my camera, but the memory of that thing in the pit haunted me, its eyes, its mouth, its endless hunger. Then the package arrived, no sender, no note, just a plain box. Inside was my camera, battered but intact. I plugged it into my laptop, the screen flickering as the photos loaded. The first were mine, the cells, the shackle, the trapdoor. But the last, the one taken when it fell, wasn't mine. It showed the cellar from above, the pit wide and gaping. I stood at its edge, my face blank, my eyes black as ink, staring up at the lens. Behind me the mass rose, its flesh spilling over the rim, its mouths open and screaming. The next photo was worse, my apartment, my bedroom, me asleep in bed, the thing crouched over me, its teeth inches from my throat. The timestamp read last night. I burned the camera, the journal, everything. But the sounds followed, the gurgling, the tapping, the heartbeat in the walls. My mirrors show shadows that aren't mine, faces pressing against the glass. Last night I woke to find my ankle swollen, the skin splitting to reveal teeth small and sharp growing from the bone. Grimsdyke isn't empty, it's alive, and it's not done with me.